Almost a year ago, I was an opener at a resort, clocking in before 5 a.m. each day. The resort is located inside of an affluent neighborhood, in a very wealthy town suburb. Employees had to park in one of two parking lots at either ends of the property. And the lot I chose was adjacent to a long and windy road outside the resort which lead to the rest of the neighborhood. The road and resort were separated by a short range of brush and trees that no one ever walked through. I'd arrived one morning per usual and put the car into park with my headlights still on. The lights in the lot weren't ever on in the morning since no one else really showed up before 6 a.m. when the sun was out, so it was usually always dark at the start of my walk. Save for security, I was one of the first employees to arrive on the property each morning and was usually completely alone in this particular parking lot at this time. This morning didn't seem any different. I had my hand literally at my keys, my brain in the process to turn off my car, when I noticed a young girl, maybe like 14 or 15 years old, come scampering. Her body language was the exact definition. Run with quick light steps, especially through fear or excitement, through the span of trees that separates the resort from the outside road. She was directly in front of my car, and my headlights illuminated a clear view of her in the pitch black. She looked like she was in high school, had long, blonde hair, and was wearing a jacket with pajamas maybe, like she just walked out of a house. One thing about her that bothered me was that she wouldn't stop laughing and smiling. I couldn't hear her laughing from outside the car, but she was visually giggling at something I wasn't aware of or could see, and it was so unnatural. She occasionally glanced behind her, as if someone else were there waiting away from the headlights. She then waved at me like it were a normal gesture at this time, and then immediately ran to my passenger side door. This all happened in a matter of seconds, and I wasn't really sure what was even happening besides my anxiety spiking. I know I simultaneously yanked the AUX from my phone to shut whatever song had been playing off while grabbing for the lock button. I remember feeling panic for never remembering if it's up or down to lock when the girl began pulling violently and incessantly on the door handle on the passenger's side. I realized because I didn't turn my car off, it had stayed locked. She began pounding on the window, and I was screaming at the top of my lungs for her to leave before pressing on my horn. I could see her laughing outside like this were some type of game, as if I were a silly friend not letting her in as a joke. After a few seconds, she stopped the pounding and trying to open my car door. Her face fell flat like I disappointed her, and she started to walk away from my car back the way she came. She waved at me again before squeezing through the trees, out of the view of my headlights. This whole encounter confused me almost as much as it scared me. Most people I told the story to just chalked it up to her being on drugs, but that narrative hasn't felt right to me despite her behavior. Maybe she was just being an extremely out-of-touch teenager whose parents need a firmer grip on her. My first thought was possibly human trafficking, but I'm not sure if that would fit this scenario as I'm not the most well-versed with the subject. I told someone when I made it to LP, but they didn't seem to care much. I didn't call the police, and I regret that. I'll never get out of my brain though how fucking off the feeling was watching a stranger, seemingly alone, pop out from the trees in the darkness laughing and then try to violently enter your car in an empty parking lot. I do think the possibility of someone else being present the whole time is a lot more scary, and I wonder who else was there and where exactly. I'll try to keep this as accurate as possible, but it's been shoved deep in my memory bank for years. Certain details are fuzzy, but here goes nothing. A little over a decade ago, I was working for the local cable internet company. I was fresh out of high school, and it was my first real job. I should mention that sometime in my preteen years I developed a habit of snooping through people's things. Whether it was at a family member's house or friends, I would always manage to slip away into people's rooms, closets, bathrooms, etc. and poke around, looking for secrets and hidden items. I would never steal anything, just take mental note of the things I found and put them back without leaving a trace. So as you can imagine, landing a job that placed me in people's houses to install cable was almost guaranteed to stir up a desire to indulge in my long-forgotten habit. When installing wires for TVs and computers, I'd end up in crawl spaces, closets, behind desks, and sometimes under beds to reach outlets and such. I'd stumble on things like porn collections, embarrassing personal hygiene products, and more than few times extremely large collections of sex toys. After a while it went from stumbling upon these things to outright looking for them. Most homeowners were too lazy to follow me from room to room, so they'd either be downstairs or outside in the yard while I went about doing my job. Like I said, I wasn't taking anything with me, just observing. About 4 to 5 months into me working this job, I ended up at a woman's house. She was in her late 20s or early 30s, I'd guess. White with sandy blonde hair and a sort of hippie bohemian vibe that was popular around my area, mixed with a bit of emo. She had a pretty big house for a single person, 3-bedroom. 2 baths and multiple living areas, but it appeared that she was the only one living there other than her cat, who would occasionally run by as I was doing my job. She let me know that she'd be outside on her porch, and to let her know if I needed anything. The house was quiet and big, so I knew I'd be able to hear her coming and have plenty of time to clean up if I happened to do some snooping around. The perfect storm, lol. All in all, it was pretty uneventful. I carried on with my work, but I'd every so often take a peek around at her things. She was pretty hot to me, so I probably would have been excited to find something that would allude to her sexual side. But no such luck. Just papers, knickknacks, some stuff that appeared to be schoolwork. But peeking out from her pillow was a notebook, similar to the old cow print ones we'd use in school. I knew for sure, given the placement, it had to be a diary of some sort. I looked around to make sure she was still outside and then cracked it open. Boring. The first few pages were random notes, planning, grocery lists. Far from the scandalous journaling about sexcapades and one-night stands that I'd hoped for. Just as I was about to put it back, I turned the page and saw a few words that caught my eye. Something's along the line of panic, anxious, safe. With concerned excitement, I went on to read a detailed story written in first person about her hitting a man over the head. Realizing he wasn't conscious, recruiting help cleaning up the mess and dumping the body in a nearby river. She also journaled about the anxiety and paranoia she was feeling about everything that happened and the stress of sharing the secret with the person who helped her dump the body. I remember being extremely uneasy and feeling more creeped out in that house every minute that passed by. The silence of the house that I previously found peaceful started to bother me. Even the jingling of the cat's collar was beginning to haunt me like something out of a horror movie. I was terrified that I'd be caught, and she'd take me out to ensure I wouldn't tell about what I read, but I managed to power through the job and get the hell out of there. On the drive home, I managed to convince myself that I probably just stumbled on her notes, or an excerpt from some fictional novel she was writing. My childhood best friend, Marie, and I were around 11 or 12 years old at the time. Marie's family had their own campsite in a provincial park about 2 hours from our hometown, and would spend the entire summer each year living in their camper out there. This particular summer, I was able to go and stay with them for a week, and we were excited to spend our time adventuring around the forest. On the last night that I was there, we decided we wanted to hurry down to the ice cream shop by the lake before it closed. It was early evening at this point, still pretty bright out but beginning to lose light. The path we took was down a short slope right next to the main road with maybe 10 feet of thick brush and trees in between. On the other side was the forest, with more tall, thick brush. So we were walking along, not seeing a single other person on the path in front or behind us. We hear a sudden rustling and snapping of branches, similar to the sound of maybe a deer moving through the woods. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, but then, the sound of running footsteps follows. Marie glances back, and suddenly grabs my arm, urging me under her breath not to look back. At the same time, the running stops. I don't know why I didn't ignore her and get a look myself. I guess I could sense the very real fear in her voice and chose to listen. We both start to panic, getting that feeling like when you're running up the stairs after turning the basement light off. We pick up speed as much as we can without breaking into a sprint, knowing the ice cream shop is only about a minute walk away at this point. The path soon breaks and we are in the parking lot. Suddenly Marie steers me hard to the left, heading towards the lake and the boat rental instead of continuing straight to the ice cream shop, and I go along with it silently. Understanding ice cream is no longer an interest right now. Marie is clearly panicking at this point. We are both looking around, but it seems whatever scared her is nowhere in sight at this point. Marie walks up to the boat rental and gets us a kayak, and we climb in and begin to paddle out into the middle of the lake. As we paddle, she tells me that there was a man behind us, and that the man had stopped running at us very abruptly upon making eye contact with her. He had been wearing a long black coat with the hood up despite it being the middle of July, had a terrible smirk on his face. And she swore that as he stopped running she saw him put something shiny away into his coat. He appeared to have just emerged out of the bushes after we walked past, given the sounds we heard right before he came running onto the path. We reached the center of the lake and stopped paddling. I pull out my Nokia brick phone that my parents had, thank God, given me, just in case. I hand it to Marie and tell her to call her parents to come pick us up. As the phone rings, I see her look out past me to the shore and go pale, lifting a hand to point to what she's seeing. I turn, and there was the man, stalking his way around the path that circled the edge of the lake, staring out at us. We sat in the middle of the lake and watched him do 2 full laps, never looking away from us, before finally disappearing. It took a few tries to get a hold of her family. We were freaking out so bad the whole time, as the sun got lower and lower. We did manage to have someone come with the truck, but by the time we reached the shore it was pretty dark outside. I don't know what we would have done if we hadn't been able to call for a ride. Looking back, I don't know why we didn't just go up to the ice cream shop, inform an adult there and ask her parents to come get us then. But it worked out, we got back safe, and we thankfully never saw the man again.